Price is the single most powerful element that keeps the supply and demand of a country's millions of products and services in check. If a government or a leadership tries to keep track of the fluctuating demand and supply of each product and service, it would either end up freezing its people to death because not enough electricity was allotted for residential use, or end up piling up tons of turkey in the warehouses of a country where Thanksgiving is rarely celebrated. I wanted to start off the series by talking about prices. But by understanding how demand and supply works, you can understand the loopholes in the system much better, which is why we will be starting off with demand and supply. Let's begin by learning what is WTA and WTP. If you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe and also watch all of my previous videos where you can learn about the history of economics and interesting videos where you can learn how did jobs come into existence. WTP. WTP is willingness to pay. Suppose you're on a lookout for a novel, but you would prefer to buy a second-hand one. You would definitely not be willing to pay the market price of a new copy for it, will you? You would have a certain price in mind that you're willing to pay, and that is WTP. WTA. WTA is willingness to accept. You can go about asking for an excessively low amount for your second-hand novel, but you can only get it if the seller is willing to accept your price, and that is WTA. Now, what is reservation price? Similar to the previous case, in many cases, as you must have seen on eBay, people set a certain price at or above which they're willing to sell their products, but it is not visible. The seller of your novel may have decided that he or she will only sell their book if he or she receives at least £5 on it. Such a price is called a reservation price, the price below which the seller won't sell. Alright, let's understand demand a little better. There is one reality that neither of us can deny, well, at least as of now, that you cannot properly quantify need. You cannot say that people are in need of this or that. Social media is a great example. Did we ever need social media? But now look at us all. Seldom, if ever, is there a fixed quantity demanded for anything. Another undeniable fact is that we human beings tend to take things for granted, especially when it is always available. We've always had an abundance of oxygen, so we've taken it for granted and polluted the environment. Abundance of trees, so we've cut them all off. Apply the same principle to electricity. If you do not put a price on it, you will find yourself acting less like a concerned dad, switching off lights in every room, and more like a careless teenager, leaving the switches on of every socket in the house. Therefore, one can easily say that there is no fixed need or a demand of a person. So what is supply? Do not confuse the number of items sold by a given organization to be supply. Supply is the quantity produced by a market or a given organization at a given price. Whether or not they have sold at all is not the question. When demand remains the same, there is an inverse relationship seen between the supply and prices. When supply increases, prices tend to fall down. A similar inverse relationship is seen between demand and prices as well. However, when supply remains the same and demand increases, prices also tend to increase due to higher equilibrium price. We will learn about this better further in the video. Price takers. Price takers are those individuals or firms who just have to accept the fact that bread is now being sold at $2 everywhere around. So they have to sell their bread at $2 or buy their bread at $2. If they try and increase the price, people will go about buying it from their competitors instead. And if, as a buyer, you ask for a lower price, you would be shooed away. When competition eliminates such bargaining power, it's called competitive equilibrium. Now remember, price-taking firms will always make sure that the marginal cost is equal to the market price. What are marginal costs now? The increasing production costs of producing one extra item. Suppose you own a flying carpet factory, and suddenly there is an increase in demand because someone came up with an idea of Aladdin. So now you have to produce more of those. But you cannot do it all by yourself, and so you hire somebody. So the cost of producing one extra carpet now increases, and those costs are called marginal costs. For a price-taking firm, the marginal cost curve is the supply curve. Because this is how you know at what quantity produced at the market price will the firm be incurring maximum profit. So what happens when the market price decreases, or when the company decides to sell the item at the same price even though the marginal costs have skyrocketed, let's say because of inflation in this case? That's when your favorite ramen noodles and Maggi, which by the way, if you haven't tried yet, you really should. It's so good that even Keith Happersberger from Try Guys said that it's amazing. Anyway, so Maggi would decide to sell the item at the same price but reduce the quantity in its bags. And the price would either remain the same or slightly higher than before but lower than their competitors. This happens even when taxes on items are increased. Now let's learn about the supply curve that matters, the market supply curve. You can find that by simply adding the total quantity each firm is producing for that given market price. Is the market price right now for this particular item $10? Great. How much for that $10 is firm A producing? How much is firm B producing? What about firm C? Now add the total quantities together and you have market supply curve. Consumer surplus. Now suppose the going rate for your item is $2, but because of its quality or other reasons, consumers are willingly paying a rate higher than its market value. You receive a surplus while they receive customer satisfaction. This is known as consumer surplus. For a better understanding, let me give you an example. In Brooklyn, New York, an economist did a research on a fresh seafood selling market, Avenue U. She found that the Asian buyers were being offered a price lower than their white counterparts. But the white buyers were willingly paying for it. So you see, the sellers were making profit off of the consumer's willingness to pay. This is known as consumer surplus, producer surplus. If you were selling the item at $2, the market price from the get-go, you were incurring marginal costs, that is, electricity bill or salaries on it. But like I mentioned before, with increase in items, there will be increase in marginal costs. So the profits you make will be the difference between the market price and the marginal costs you incur. So if you look at the graph again, this would be the producer's surplus. Deadweight. Assuming you choose to not produce enough items, maybe because you simply can't, or perhaps you're full of yourself, you will be making fewer than the demanded number of items, but you will be making less than the maximum possible profits. Your surplus will be smaller if you produce, let's say, 5,000 fewer items. That would mean that there will be people who are unable to buy the items despite having the money to pay for it. But also, there will be deadweight. That means you will not be making possible profits because of not producing enough items. Like I mentioned before, if demand increases but the supply remains the same, the prices also increase so that there is a new equilibrium. You see, when the demand increases but the supply remains the same, the demand curve shifts. You see, if suddenly more number of people are asking for avocados because they are healthy, but the number of suppliers remain the same, the suppliers have the same number of hands and resources. How can they produce those millions of avocados all of a sudden? They need time, they need money, and they need equipment. That can happen using more money, which increasing prices can supply. But what if demand remains the same but supply is increased? Then the price decreases. Why would a firm sell more number of items for less price? It can happen, and it has happened before with the advent of technology, which is why I scream and shout that automation isn't all that bad. You see, if your workers are having to fill those food baskets with their bare hands, they can only do it during the working hours and while their backs break. If a machine that can pack and fill those baskets is introduced, it can do the job quicker and with fewer errors and around the clock. That will significantly reduce the company's costs and reduce the marginal cost due to increased productivity, because they will be producing more number of items than before, using the same number of hours and the resources. Now, to get rid of these excess supply, And to get a competitive advantage in the market, they will reduce the prices. The same thing happens when a new competitor enters the market or the old one leaves. Such a phenomenon is called a shock because it causes a change in the demand and supply equilibrium in the market. It is also called exogenous in nature because such a model does not explain why such a shock happened, but it just tells you what to do when it happens. Consequences over causes. Now that you've understood the basic concepts of demand and supply, there are a few realities that you need to know. In real life economics, you will not encounter a perfect competitive market. Competitive equilibrium where competition leads to fair trade on a given price is far from reality, because it is only possible if all sellers are selling the same product. If a seller has a product slightly unique from others, he or she can impose a price that he or she wants because there is no competition to bring the prices down, and therefore easy for him or her to dominate the market. That reminds me, I should finish eating that apple today. Anyway, it is also not possible because consumers are not aware of what the going on the market price really is. Even though we do have online retail markets today, we do tend to buy most of our items offline, and we would rather buy it quickly from the nearest store than hop store to find the best deal. This is why companies have been seen taking advantage of the busy general public unethically. This isn't just me saying this. Alfred Marshall, an economist from the 18th century, predicted this a long time ago. Here's what he said. Large firms could produce at lower unit costs than small firms. But when this happens, we see a winner takes it all scenario, where one of the competing large firm emerges as the winner and goes against the going price to set their own. He also went on to say this further. Ethical forces are among those of which the economist has to take account. Attempts have indeed been made to construct an abstract science with regard to the actions of an economic man who is under no ethical influences and who pursues pecuniary gain selfishly. But they have not been successful. Unfortunately, that isn't the truth anymore. They have been successful time and again. Moreover, supply and demand may provide the base on which prices are decided, but that is all they give us, the base. The actual price depends a lot many more factors than just that. For example, the location. KFC does not sell its bucket of chicken at the same price in Pakistan and Sri Lanka as it does in US or Canada. But among all the factors on which the prices depends, the most dangerous one is a human emotion. Does how your enemy feel that month severely affect whether or not you will be able to buy a loaf of bread tomorrow? As much as it might seem like a conspiracy theory, it is anything but. Let me give you an example to make you understand how this works. A group of 5 people go fishing with the intention to feast on their catch. They decide to find the biggest fish that could easily feed 5 hungry men and nothing less. Obviously, it wasn't easy. Hours go by and they couldn't find what they were looking for. Now in this situation, there are 2 possible solutions they can choose. Either all 5 will disperse and unsuccessfully try to catch one big fish by themselves, unsuccessfully because neither of them lifts heavy objects too often. The other solution is to catch several tiny fish and simply call it a day. You see how even if one of the persons in the group feels like choosing either of these solutions, the entire group gets distracted, persuaded, or even demotivated. And the entire group loses out on the opportunity of finding a big fish. And the same applies to the economy and its prices. If someone releases a research paper saying that air fresheners have CFCs that deplete the ozone layer, plenty many people will decide rather to have a stinking bathroom than skin cancer and boycott air fresheners altogether. And economists, along with lobbied researchers, have done it many times in the past, with petrol prices, housing prices, and many more. Let's learn some interesting stories about how price manipulation in the name of economics has been carried out in the past and continues to be to this day in my next video. Subscribe to stay updated. and learn about prices in economics in my next video.